Hi-ho everyone, my name is Mr. Fruit and welcome back to Tom Clancy's The Division 2. Thank you very much to Ubisoft for sponsoring this video. And I'm very excited to show you guys some in-game content I got to capture while I was at the event last week. Earlier in this week, we showed some of the early game content you're going to experience, and now I get to talk about the fun stuff, the end game. But if you want to learn more about the game, click the link down in the description box below. But with that said, let's talk end game. Now, the way they described it in their own words, and quote, based on what we learned from the Division 1, we've developed a robust post-launch plan for the Division 2. And I'm inclined to believe them. One thing I've always praised Ubisoft for doing is their support on games. Doesn't matter how they do at the beginning, they're always trying to do better. I mean, look at For Honor, look at Rainbow Six Siege, look at the Division. Always allowing for years of extra support for developers to add the little things they couldn't get to at the beginning, improve upon things. Like, they're not making me say this, like truly, Ubisoft does a really good job of that. So as an example, in the Division 1, they added this throughout the lifespan for the end game. Obviously, you had your main missions, your crafting, and your dark zone. That was kind of the release of the Division, kinda lacked an end game. But with more patches, they introduced projects, gear sets, bounties, recalibration, world tiers, open world bosses, leaderboards, exotic weapons, loadouts, commendations, and even a PvP arena. Now, in the Division 2, everything I just listed is there at launch. As we know, they're introducing specializations, which you may or may not see in this video. There's the survivalist, that's what I am, they wield a crossbow, the sharpshooter, who has a 50 cal sniper rifle, and the demolitionist, the grenade launcher. Now, I kind of covered this in my Division 2 video back during E3 when I got a really early look at the game. They're essentially a power weapon that you can get, and once you hit max level, you can choose a specialization, and I asked, you can switch between any specialization back at the base of operations. So if you want to be crossbow dude, cool, but if you want to switch over to grenade launcher dude, you can do that. Each one has its own skill tree, perks that you unlock, and everything, and so if you want to fully unlock everything for each specialization, you can go ahead and do that. If you have a favorite, if you want to keep switching it up, but that's a nice little spice, little flavor to add in there. For instance, one of the drones I'm using in this video, it'll go around and top off me or my ally's armor. I can tell it to like stick to one ally if I want it to, and it'll keep topping off your armor if you're not taking too much damage. That's a thing that was unique to my specialization. You also have the living world system, which I kind of mentioned in the previous video. You have these control points in the world that you go about. You have all these different factions. Each one is going to be vying for territory. The more a certain faction has, the more they'll show up in the open world. They'll be scavenging. You got to fight off, fend, and that's a constantly evolving war kind of inside the game as you play. Weekly invasions, strongholds, occupied dark zones. So these are going to be like the toughest of the tough. You go in dark zones and there are going to be some dudes who are like, yo, we're going to mess you up. And it's supposed to be some of the hardest content or levels there. You have roaming vendors, you have clans, and of course a photo mode. Not only that, but there's some post-launch content already free for everyone planned. They have raids. One will be available shortly after launch. I can't say much, but they teased what that might look like at the event, and I'm excited. They have 3 episodes, each adding new story missions, areas to explore, and more, and new threats, projects, bounties, gear sets, exotics, modes, and maps, especially for PvP Arena. And the end game, of course, is post-campaign content. You essentially go through the regular campaign, and that's when endgame starts. Now, once you do that, endgame changes. They surprised everybody by introducing the Black Tusks. They arrive and invade DC. Now, who in the world are the Black Tusks? They are the people you are seeing me fight in this video. They're insane, and their AI is cranked up, man. They were so much harder to fight than everybody else. Now, the Black Tusk will invade all elements of the game, including campaign missions, the open world, and the dark zone. They said most of those occupied dark zones are now going to be the Black Tusk. So, okay, sure, a new faction, that's cool. What does that do? Well, the interesting thing about Black Tusk, they are the... I don't know why they're not already running the world. They're technologically the most savvy. In fact, you'll probably see in a clip here, there was this... Well, we called it the robotic dog. I saw it in this room and I was like, wait a minute. Is that a robot dog? And I was trying to tell the people playing with it, I was like, guys, I think there's a robot dog. And they were too busy. And of course, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then they come upon it, they're like, robot dog. And I was like, I told you guys. But it's insane. They have all these little AI and robots. They, oh my gosh, they have these drones that are suicide drones. They just come out, explode right on top of you. Oh man, you gotta watch out for those. There are some elites that just sit there and send out armored ones of the, oh my gosh, I'm getting flashbacks already. They even have little robots that look like a little Mars rover. I mean, they're attempting to take over and become, you know, the new ruling. I mean, with the stuff they have, I wouldn't be surprised if they manage. But yeah, what they've done, and they talked about the Black Tusks, they made them a smarter enemy, so they're just out of the gate, harder to fight because they're smarter. And then they employ some of those new tactics and new enemies. And I'd mentioned in the last video, bullet sponges aren't nearly a thing like they are in the Division 1. Some people were joking watching the video like, yeah, he says that as he unloads like 2 mags into a guy. Okay, yes. I mean, it's not a game where, you know, like a normal person, 1-2 bullets. At the end of the day, you have to realize it's a looter shooter. I mean, what are you gonna go for if time to kill doesn't change? But it's drastically better, as you should probably see throughout this video. It doesn't take any longer all of my ammo to down a guy, and what you'll notice too is there's a lot of variation of enemies, and a lot of them are much easier to take down. It's not like everybody needs to focus fire a single unit to just get on to the next one, so on and so forth. You'll just have to take my word for it though. It felt good, and that was just scraping the beginning of the end game. We didn't have like builds that we were ready. It was just randomized loadouts, so I'm sure once people get those builds that they want and they spec accordingly, people will melt even quicker. So between the specializations, which add a little bit onto the gameplay, as well as the different perks that you can use and skills, you have everything that they learned and implemented in Division 1 in-game immediately at release. And then some, as I mentioned. You have less bullet sponges. So endgame isn't just like, alright, well, I'm max level, here are just 80 bajillion armored dudes, have fun, you know? There needs to be a sense of you feel like you're getting stronger, but at the same time, you know, you're not just completely melting these guys. It's a fine balance, and I mean, I certainly don't know how to solve the issue, but I think they've done a pretty good job. And the interesting thing too is like when you're shooting the robot dog, for instance, and he's taking a lot of bullets to take down, that makes a little more sense. You know, he's a big, giant, armored robot dog, right? So, of course, it's going to take a few more bullets. And it was interesting learning a lot of the new enemies' weak points. So, for instance, we learned with the robot dog, using fire, if you're able to throw some sort of an incendiary grenade or something, pretty much just takes the armor off immediately, and then you can just smoke it. The Mars rover robot, its treads, if you shoot off its treads, it can no longer move. And the robot dog, by the way, can like jump on stuff. Very agile, it's extremely terrifying. Now, personally for me, the end game I'm most excited about are the strongholds, the occupied dark zones, and the PvP arena. Mainly, I'm looking forward to interacting with other players and doing some PvP action. And some of you might notice, but we are actually fighting inside of the Air and Space Museum for one of those missions. Because you'll notice there's a point in the video where we go into this planetarium, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is beautiful, wow, and it's like telling us all about space, and I'm like, oh, man, I hope nobody comes in here to shoot us, and of course, I'm like, did I see somebody up there? Yep. And then it went into a giant fight, and we died a lot of times. Like, a lot of times. That's the meaty stuff you need to know about. And some of you are going to be able to experience some of what I talked about in the private beta, which is available now for those that did get access to it. But if you want to learn more about the Division 2, click the link down in the description box below. So with that said, I want to thank Ubisoft very much for sponsoring this video again. Hope you guys enjoyed this video and are looking forward to the game. I know I am. So with that said, thank you very much for watching. Have yourselves a fantastic. I'll talk to you in the next one. Farewell.